Welcome to Book Nibbles, Big Ideas, Small Bites. Malcolm Gladwell's Blink is a book about the split-second decisions we make, the unconscious judgments that happen so fast we can hardly trace them, and the surprising ways they shape our lives. Gladwell begins with an arresting story of an art museum in California that proudly displayed a kouros, a supposedly ancient Greek statue, purchased after extensive testing and validation by scientists and experts. The marble, the weathering, the provenance, all suggested it was authentic. But when art historians, who had spent lifetimes immersed in Greek sculpture, looked at it, many immediately felt a sense of wrongness. They couldn't always articulate why, but something seemed off. Their gut reaction was that the statue was a fake, and as it turned out, the gut was right. This story sets the stage for the book's central theme. Sometimes, in the blink of an eye, we know more than we realize, and our instantaneous judgments can be more accurate than carefully reasoned analysis. But at the same time, Gladwell warns that snap judgments can also lead us astray, particularly when they are clouded by bias or irrelevant distractions. The heart of Blink is the exploration of what Gladwell calls thin slicing, the ability of our unconscious minds to find patterns in situations based on very narrow slices of experience. Imagine a psychologist who can watch a married couple have a brief conversation and within minutes predict whether their marriage will last. John Gottman, a real psychologist who devoted decades to studying couples, could do just that. By focusing on micro-expressions, the small, fleeting facial movements and patterns of contempt, defensiveness, or stonewalling, Gottman could predict divorce with over 90% accuracy after observing a couple for just a few minutes. It's a striking example of how thin slices, when analyzed correctly, can reveal hidden truths that long drawn-out study might miss. Gottman's research also shows how incredibly complex the unconscious is, capturing signals and processing them before the conscious mind has time to deliberate. But thin slicing does not only belong in a psychologist's lab. Gladwell shows how it applies in real-world decisions as well. Take, for example, the story of a military war game, where a retired Marine general, acting as the leader of a fictional enemy state, stunned the U.S. military by sinking their ships in a matter of minutes. He relied on instinct, rapid decisions, and unconventional tactics, rather than carefully reasoned analysis, and he overwhelmed the methodical, data-driven strategies of the Pentagon planners. His victory demonstrated how flexible, intuitive thinking often outpaces rigid, over-analyzed processes, especially in fast-moving environments. But this also illustrates one of Gladwell's recurring warnings. Intuition can be powerful, but it is not infallible, and it is highly context-dependent. Gladwell fills the book with fascinating examples of people who excel through rapid cognition. He tells the story of a tennis coach who can predict when a player will double fault, sometimes even before the racket makes contact with the ball. The coach can't quite explain how he knows, he simply feels it. His unconscious mind has absorbed thousands of hours of patterns, body language, and subtle shifts in posture that signal a mistake is imminent. This, again, is the essence of thin slicing, an almost magical-seeming ability that is really grounded in accumulated experience and exposure. Similarly, Gladwell discusses a food expert who can dissect the taste of a cookie or a sauce in meticulous detail, breaking down what ordinary people experience as vague impressions into precise components of texture, sweetness, balance, and aroma. The expert's mind has been trained through thousands of repetitions to capture, interpret, and articulate the invisible details. It's an argument for respecting the unconscious as a kind of muscle, one that can be trained, refined, and sharpened through practice. Yet Gladwell does not glorify intuition blindly. He explores its failures as carefully as its successes. He writes about the tragic police shooting of Amadou Diallo, an unarmed West African immigrant in New York City, who was killed after officers mistook him for a threat. In the blink of an eye, their minds processed ambiguous signals and leapt to a fatal conclusion. Here, intuition was not a savior, but a destroyer, driven by stress, fear, and deeply ingrained biases. Gladwell points out that in moments of extreme stress, our unconscious systems can misfire, leading to tunnel vision, panic, or prejudiced judgments. The Amadou Diallo case shows the dangers of relying on snap judgments when the stakes are life and death, and when cultural biases can distort perception. In fact, Gladwell devotes much of the book to explaining that while intuition can be incredibly powerful, it requires the right conditions to work well: calm environments, adequate experience, and freedom from irrelevant noise. Noise and distractions are recurring villains in Blink. Gladwell tells the story of a hospital where doctors struggled to correctly diagnose patients with chest pain. Too many factors were being considered: medical history, lab tests, personal impressions, and doctors often misjudged whether someone was experiencing a heart attack. But when the hospital streamlined its process, reducing the number of variables considered to just a few key indicators, accuracy improved dramatically. The lesson is that overthinking and information overload can harm decision-making, while a pared-down, focused approach often yields better results. This lesson applies far beyond medicine. In investing, hiring, even everyday choices, more information does not necessarily mean better outcomes. Sometimes stripping away the clutter allows intuition to do its best work. One of the most compelling sections of the book concerns unconscious bias. Gladwell discusses the implicit association test, IAT, a psychological tool that reveals how quickly people associate certain groups with positive or negative words. Even people who consciously reject prejudice often show unconscious preferences, associating men with leadership more quickly than women, for example, or linking black faces with negative words faster than white faces. Gladwell admits he himself struggled with the results of his own IAT. This research underscores how our unconscious judgments are not always benign. They can be deeply influenced by cultural stereotypes and past experiences, which then shape our behavior in ways we may not intend or even notice. For instance, orchestras historically favored male musicians until audition processes were changed to include screens, so judges could not see the performers. Almost overnight, the number of women admitted skyrocketed, revealing how visual biases had been distorting judgment. Gladwell also dives into the business world, showing how unconscious judgments affect everything from product marketing to job interviews. One story involves the rise of Pepsi during the Pepsi Challenge, a blind taste test where people consistently preferred Pepsi over Coca-Cola in small sips. Coca-Cola panicked, reformulated its recipe, and released New Coke, which flopped spectacularly. The reason, Gladwell explains, is that intuition was misinterpreted. People may have preferred Pepsi in a single sip, but over the course of an entire can, Coke's flavor profile was more satisfying. Thin slicing works well in certain contexts, but if you slice too thinly, you might draw the wrong conclusion. Similarly, companies often fall into the trap of overvaluing first impressions in hiring, favoring candidates who seem right based on charisma or superficial fit, rather than those who will perform best in the long run. Snap judgments can create blind spots, especially when they prioritize style over substance. At times, Gladwell's stories almost feel like detective mysteries. He recounts how an emergency room doctor revolutionized heart attack diagnosis by ignoring most information and focusing only on a few key variables. He describes how experts in facial expressions, like Paul Ekman, can read micro-expressions so quickly that they can catch lies or suppressed emotions in milliseconds. Ekman's skill is a vivid illustration of how the unconscious picks up what others miss. But Gladwell also reminds readers that expertise takes time to cultivate. Intuition is not magic, but the product of experience and disciplined practice. The thin slices we rely on are only as good as the data our unconscious has absorbed. That is why a tennis coach can predict a double fault while a novice can't, or why a food expert can dissect a cookie while most people can only say, "Tastes good." Gladwell doesn't shy away from the limitations of intuition either. He stresses that unconscious judgments can be corrupted by context. For example, musicians who auditioned behind a screen were judged more fairly. But in everyday life, we rarely have screens to protect us from bias. Our snap judgments about people's competence, trustworthiness, or intelligence can be influenced by superficial cues like height, gender, or race. In fact, Gladwell cites research showing that tall men are disproportionately represented in leadership roles, not because height makes someone a better leader, but because of unconscious associations between size and authority. It is a sobering reminder that blink decisions are not neutral. They are socially conditioned. Throughout the book, Gladwell plays with this tension. Intuition is both powerful and perilous, both our best ally and our hidden enemy. What determines which it will be? He argues that two conditions make intuition reliable: expertise and clarity. When people have deep, specific experience, their snap judgments are grounded in real knowledge. And when irrelevant noise is stripped away, the unconscious can shine. Conversely, when people are inexperienced or overwhelmed by irrelevant cues, intuition falters. Gladwell suggests that the best strategy is not to reject intuition or worship it blindly, but to cultivate environments where it can work properly, through training, awareness, and structural changes that reduce bias. Gladwell's writing style itself mirrors the subject of the book: fast, engaging, and full of surprising turns. He doesn't lecture, he tells stories, and those stories stick because they capture how intuition feels in real life. We all know the sensation of instantly liking or distrusting someone, of knowing the answer to a question without being able to explain why. Gladwell legitimizes those experiences, showing that they are not irrational whims, but reflections of a powerful cognitive system. But he also warns us to be humble, to recognize that our instincts are vulnerable to error and prejudice. His balanced view gives the book a richness that neither romanticizes nor demonizes intuition. For readers, Blink offers both insight and practical lessons. It encourages us to respect our instincts, but also to question them. It shows that expertise matters, that experience sharpens our unconscious, and that environments shape our judgments more than we realize. The Kuros statue teaches us that experts' gut feelings deserve attention. The Gottman research reminds us that relationships reveal their truth in fleeting signals. The Amadou Diallo tragedy warns us about bias and stress. The Pepsi Challenge reminds us not to slice too thin. The orchestra auditions show us how to reduce bias structurally. Each story adds a piece to the puzzle, creating a nuanced picture of human decision-making. In the end, Blink is about the hidden power of thinking without thinking. It challenges the modern obsession with data, analysis, and rational deliberation, arguing that sometimes our best decisions are the ones we cannot explain. But it also cautions us not to mistake every hunch for wisdom. The book's lasting impact lies in this delicate balance. It empowers readers to trust their instincts, but also to refine them, question them, and build conditions where they can serve us well rather than betray us. Gladwell leaves us with a sense of awe for the human mind, a recognition of its subtle power, and a reminder of its fragility. In the blink of an eye, we can see the truth, or we can be blinded by bias. Learning to tell the difference is the art that Gladwell invites us to practice. And that's it. The Blink by Malcolm Gladwell. Thanks for listening to Book Nibbles. If you enjoyed this bite-sized book, don't forget to subscribe for more quick, insightful summaries. See you in the next nibble.